Hey, how's it going? Today is 28th of February, and Wednesday we take a look at the market. Something myself I'm looking to understand a little bit better. That would be business when it comes to steel production, and there's something that was recently on the news about Tata Steel and our production and purchasing new equipment, as well as how I'm going to be taking a look at in Europe, right? When it comes to high intensity carbon materials, right? I think the EU is looking to introduce a new tax. So it's something myself I'll be reading and or trying to understand, right? Since some of the items that would be heavy polluters of environment, the EU is looking to introduce carbon footprint tax, including some of those industries, including steel production on, or let's try to understand it, since there might be something there when it comes to reduction and or taking a look at the environment, right? But let's begin by taking a look at some of these articles. We're gonna be taking a look at the article, right? Something that was published recently. Myself, I'm interested to understand. Tata Steel, that's the name of the company, right? And some of the decisions behind making those. Well, I'm interested in understanding that would be then they're working with electric furnace, right? Can they only work with scraps? That's what I'm interested in understanding. Or, or can they work with refinement of steel, right? Or can they only work with scraps? Well, what's the difference between the furnaces, right? So that's what we taught us here. What's the difference between a blast furnace and electric furnace? Let's try to understand it. I think the way how things would be structured, right? So the quick note or quick story coming into this, right? So when you're starting a business, right, you would begin by one part of your supply chain, right? And over a period of time, you would consider acquire additional parts of the supply chain, right? So in this particular case, Tata deciding and or making decisions when it comes to acquiring some of the car manufacturers within UK. So that would be more taking hold of more of the supply chain, right? While that perhaps might be a sound decision, right? I think everyone's doing it, by the way, all the business people out there are doing it when it comes to acquiring more of the supply chain, right? But that way, in the beginning, you're beginning by acquiring one part, and you're considering acquiring other parts as well, right? And let's progress to this article. Tata Steel has announced that thousands of steel workers will lose their jobs as the plant starts to use electric arc furnace to produce steel. The company says new technology, which costs more than 1 billion, will allow them to make steel in more environmentally friendly way. There might be something with tax, carbon footprint tax. Even Europe has it when it comes to importing some of the perhaps finished goods, including steel. Something that will most likely will come in effect. I'll be taking a look at dates, right? But very soon, right? So perhaps that has something to do with that. Port Talbot plant currently uses blast furnace, but how does the new technology work, and why will that changes cost so many jobs, right? So we're looking to reduce operational costs as well. Let's take a look at it. How does the blast furnace work? So that would be more of the older technology, and or it would be different heating method, right? In order to make steel using a blast furnace, first iron needs to be produced. Steel workers do this by adding iron ore, coke, limestone into a furnace. Coke is coal based on the which packed full of carbon inside the furnace, heated to more than 1000 Celsius using extremely hot air, which blasted into a furnace. Uh, that's a pretty straightforward process. It makes a lot of sense. So familiar more or less with this process. These three integrations burn carbon and create molten iron at the bottom of the furnace. All of the impurities in this mix combined with the limestone to create byproducts called slag. Okay. The molten iron is taken out of the furnace and it's then refined using oxygen, ultimately creating steel. According according to 2021 World Steel report, making steel is a way to emit around 2.32 tons of CO2 per ton of steel, right? The, I have taken part in some of the webinars here in UK, right? And they would tell me to turn, if I don't need to, I need to turn the lights off and all those kind of things to reduce carbon footprint on my own habits, right? While I was thinking about some of my habits, I was all this time I was thinking about this fairness. I can tell you one thing. But either way, once that been said about how many tons of CO2 we're talking about, but either way, let's progress and see what difference that would make, right? Okay, let's take a look at electric furnaces and what are the difference. Electric arc furnace produce steel differently. The furnace is filled with cold recycled steel. Oh, okay. I think would that be only thing what they can work with, right? Then electrolytes are lowered into a furnace. Electric currents are passed throughout the electrolytes, which heat up the furnace like an oven and melt the scrap steel. Okay. Limestone. Because it's my tax money, so let's see what we have just purchased, right? What is it? $500 million that we just spent on this technology. Let's take a look at what we have just purchased, right? I don't think this technology, since it was paid with my tax money, I don't think it belongs to me. But let's try to understand it. Limestone, lows per carbon dioxide can take that to purify the steel. The arc furnace use a lot of less energy than the blast furnace. They are much greener, right. Greenwashing, a little bit of that going on. Let's progress. Then the blast furnace is Port Talbot. It's 100% of the materials used is scrap metal. Science suggests that only 0.67 tons of CO2 is produced of this steel, right? Okay, that's why I thought it's 100%, right? So we can only work with scrap. So I was taking a look at Europe. Within Europe, about 44% of all the steel that Europe is working with is scrap. So that means 56% in Europe. As of now, we're working not only with scrap, right? So perhaps as of now, if that's something that UK is gonna go with, they won't be able to work with anything other than scrap, if that's fair to say. But however, running electric furnace costs jobs. But simply, the process requires fewer steps and ultimately fewer people. For example, in the arch process, far less raw materials are used, which means that there is a less need for steel workers. Perhaps those people would be free to do other things, but not necessarily good, not necessarily a bad thing, and perhaps alternative jobs that might be there. But it might be a good piece of kit. It just what I was trying to understand, if it's only with scrap they might be able to work with. Why is the industry decarbonizing? To reduce the amount of greenhouse gases pumped into the atmosphere and stop the earth heating up, which would help to maintain safe climate. Okay. Which is important. Yesterday I was watching about polar ice and quarter to be melted within, I don't know, a matter of a couple of perhaps up to 5 years. So it's a real issue, right? Let's progress. All four coal furnaces are approaching the end of their lifespan and must be replaced. The government said replacing all coal furnaces will reduce UK's carbon emissions by around 1.5%. Which might not be large, but I think it's a sizable one, as well as we're not talking about it, but I think that would be as well as potentially UK. That's myself coming from a business perspective. Would that mean UK would be able to sell to Europe compared to perhaps other governments who, as of with new legislations coming into effect, not necessarily would be, well, there might be some taxes. So UK being more competitive compared to other governments being able to sell to Europe some of the steel, right? Quickly, right? I don't know. I haven't read this article, right? There might be a lot of information here, right? EU climate targets, how decarbonizing the steel industry, right? So I think there might be a lot of important information here, right? I was trying to find about the taxes. I was trying to understand how much of the carbon footprint taxes and how those taxes gonna be affected UK's industry when it comes to UK selling some of the steel to Europe. So what would that tax and carbon footprint making UK more competitive, I guess, but it depends, right? The steel industry is responsible for around 5% of CO2 emissions in the EU and 7% globally. It needs to develop a commercialize new low CO2 technologies within the next 5 to 10 years in order to be aligned with EU climate targets. So there might be a lot of information. Most of the time, it's not that relevant information. If I'll be able to find, let's try to find some data, right? CO2 emissions and energy use in Europe's steel production have already been halved since the 1960s, and the sector aims to achieve further cuts of 80 to 95% by 2090, right? Okay, that's many years compared to 1990s level, since the conventional blast furnaces, that would be basic oxygen furnace production route, is highly CO2 intensive, usually with a carbon footprint of 1.6 to up to 2 tons for CO2 per ton of crude steel produced, right? So if that's as of now, that's the target, right? So perhaps developing economies not necessarily will be able to improve equipment, what equipment they are working with. If there is going to be carbon footprint tax introduced on those economies, right? Who might be considering importing into Europe, right? A quick note. And most EU steel mills are operating close to optimum efficiency. The industry increasingly focusing on hydrogen-based steel making to decarbonize the sector. Okay. Several projects are announced across Europe aim to replace existing steel production processes with the new steel plants based on the direct reduction of iron using hydrogen. The REPower EU plan highlights that around 30% of primary steel production in the EU is expected to be decarbonized by 2030 using renewable hydrogen. Okay, if they can deliver on that, it depends. That would be heavily intensive, energy demanding sector, steel production, and they're looking to as of now, if there's a blast furnace that use a lot of coal, perhaps they might be considered different energy sources, including hydrogen. I don't know as of now what's the cost for 1 ton of steel. I don't know what's the price, and would that be? I don't know. It's for argument's sake. If I had to guess, I would say perhaps $300, right? Perhaps with commodity prices and all money losing its value, commodity prices perhaps doubling. So would that be, as of now, 1 ton of steel, would that cost? I'm just guessing, right? Would that be double of that? Steel, perhaps? I don't know. Let's take a look at the price of 1 ton of steel and how much that would cost. Would that be $6,000? I have no idea. Quickly, right? Steel prices as of now in UK, right? But it depends perhaps on the quantity, how much you would like to purchase, all this kind of things. So that might be important. But either way, 188 stainless steel, that would be 1,200. 316 is something that my cup is made of. That's the type of steel it's made of, and it's 2,000 pounds for 1 ton of it. Oh, interesting. And just a quick note. Let's come back to the article. Quickly, right? Let's take a look at the cost. In the short to medium term, making low CO2 steel is likely to be more expensive than current steel production costs. The future cost of hydrogen-based steel production are highly uncertain, since they depend on the future cost of renewable hydrogen and electricity, which as of now in UK is very expensive electricity. I mean, let's progress. The report gathers compare the result of several external studies that shows that with the strong decrease in the cost of renewable hydrogen and increase in the price of CO2 emissions, so we are looking to balance the increasing carbon footprint tax, and there would be abundance of hydrogen energy. Okay. Hydrogen-based steelmaking could become competitive with current steelmaking costs by 2050. So that's long-term goals. Okay. there's perhaps some of the subsidies coming from governments to reduce some of that pain, right? Instruments such as carbon contracts for difference highlighted in the report could reduce the risk of developing low carbon technologies by hedging the uncertain future carbon costs. The major investment need to be developed low CO2 steelmaking plants will, however, need to go hand in hand with investment in the infrastructure required to enable these solutions. They enable electricity and transmission networks, hydrogen-related infrastructure, and CO2 transport and storage infrastructure. Since all these technologies, that would be additional investment into infrastructure, and all these technologies are emerging technologies, which potentially would be very, very expensive technologies, by the way, and to work with very highly pressurized hydrogen is very expensive, and very few people can do it, right? As well as the windmills and building those farms, very few companies can build those windmills again. So again, a handful of companies who can do it. And let's take a look at transport, even cars. Only one company, that would be Toyota, who can build cars to be powered by hydrogen, right? Again, just one company. Yourself, if you're interested in learning more, I have published a book where I'm taking a look at livestock enterprise, and I'm sharing as much information as I can when it comes to developing your own business and what will be important when we are taking a look at financial metrics, right? And some of those challenging new markets, right? And it can be hard. It definitely can't, right? So I'm just trying to understand it, right? I don't want to jump into anything when it comes to perhaps closure of some of the departments, reduction of labor force, as well as investments. I'm trying to understand it, right? And perhaps share that information with others, right? Yourself, if you're interested in the more sustainable living and developing or taking all the different adventures, including business, I have published a book that will be a first milestone and how you can potentially achieve that. I'm sharing that within this book. There's going to be a QR code in the corner company's website below. Quickly, right? Let's close this video by taking a look at our background, right? So we just to summarize today's video, right? So we were taking a look at a piece of kit that was over a billion of pounds. Half of the billion was the taxpayers' money invested into this technology, which is great, right? This technology potentially would be able to work only with scraps, right? Not necessarily refining steel, which is kind of interesting, right? But then, or perhaps some of the reasoning behind it, that would be selling some of the steel perhaps to Europe later, making more UK's industry more competitive. Kinda working only with scraps. But either way, the steel sector generates over 330,000 direct jobs and 2.9 million indirect jobs, making it a key part of EU economy. So that's without UK, right? Steel production in the EU is dominated by a handful of countries. Some of those being top economies, right? Germany producing 26% EU steel in 2020, followed by Italy, which is 15%. France, which is 8%, Spain is 8%, just over half of the steel produced in the EU is 2020, 56% was made via primary route and 44% was made throughout the recycle route, right? So that's about 50%, so to say, right? So that's only 50 or 44% that as of now, potentially UK would be able to work with only within that steel, right? Talbot port, right? Since they have shut down some of their operations, right? 14 countries in Europe have primary steelmaking capabilities. The smallest such as sites in the EU have crude steelmaking capabilities such as above 1 million tons per year, while the largest sites have capabilities of around 10 megatons a year. That are 24 such integrated steelmaking sites in the EU. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.